Thank you all so much for coming today. My name's Don Cook from the Robert McCormick Foundation in Chicago, and this is very exciting, and a couple things are exciting. One is to see a lot of people we know well and have seen before, and the other is to see a whole bunch of people we've never seen before. So we're looking forward, I hope everybody's meeting and mingling throughout the day. We've got a great day planned for everyone as we sort of keep building this learning community about how philanthropy and nonprofits can work together to help veterans and our returning warriors. Why are we here? We're here for a couple of reasons. One is that nobody and no organization can do this alone, and that we realize that it's everybody's responsibility to help our warriors come home and be the next greatest generation. We're here because collaborations matter, and working together, partnerships, meeting people, building relationships makes a difference. And we're here from the philanthropy side and the nonprofit side because the work is local. And at the end of the day, this is about communities, and it's about families. It's about individual veterans and their families. And that's where the philanthropy does its best work, is in their own communities where they know what works and what doesn't work. I do want to take a quick second as we get started this morning just to thank the dream team, I call it, which is the small gang that we worked with planning this last year and this year. Which includes Catherine Grimes from Bristol-Myers Squibb's Foundation. She wants to be complimented on her shoes today. Anne Marie Doherty from the Woodruff Foundation. Wants absolutely no compliments. Peter Long, of course, from Blue Shield Foundation of California, who flew on the red eye to get here. Kathy Roth Duquet, our favorite force of nature. And of course, Stephanie Powers and the team at the Council and Foundations, without whom we could do nothing. So let's get this started, and speaking of that team, it all starts with leadership, and I want to introduce Vicki Spruill, who provides adult supervision, among other things, to Stephanie sometimes. But without her leadership, we wouldn't be here either, and this is, we've talked about this at the big conferences and with the exchange we'll be hearing about, and all of Stephanie's work. So please welcome to the stage Vicki Spruill.
Good morning, everybody. It's so heartening to look out and see this amazing crowd assembled here. You know, Don has been such a sensational leader for this effort since the beginning, and I think we all owe him another round of applause for his leadership. I am so heartened to see so many of you demonstrating your personal and professional commitments to veterans and their families by joining us here today. With over 2.5 million returning veterans, the scale of the issues facing military families requires an all-hands-on-deck effort, maybe like never before, that includes community institutions, the private sector, government, and of course, philanthropy. When we announced this effort last year, I don't think any of us realized that the Impact Pledge would receive contributions from 34 organizations with commitments of over $276 million. And I think that the pledges are substantial, and they mark a historically significant commitment from philanthropy. And while today's event heralds some new commitments, the real advancement here today goes well beyond the dollars and well beyond the funds. These organizations have also made the commitment to collaborate and to collaborate over time. And events like this one, the interim meeting in New York last December, and yesterday's first organized Veterans Philanthropy Exchange meeting provide opportunities to discuss next steps and to build relationships. And I think that's a theme you're going to hear throughout the day that will really make the difference down the road. Today, we're going to spend the afternoon sharing solutions, sharing lessons learned, and lots of work in progress. The forthcoming panel discussions and solution sessions, as we're calling them, are designed to address key challenges and opportunities facing veterans and military families. And you in this crowd know those challenges all too well: homelessness, employment, mental health. We hope that you'll continue to share these best practices on the Veterans Philanthropy Exchange, which is a virtual community, in the coming months. But today's event, as I said before, is about so much more than money. It's about a shared desire to focus on what really matters: supporting military families and honoring our commitment to those who have served. Ultimately, it's people and its relationships built on mutual respect and trust and built over time. That's the real source of lasting change. And these efforts are only as strong as all of you in this room who animate them. I think if we emphasize impact and build partnerships, we'll be so much greater than the sum of our parts, and that is really the goal of this learning community. All of you in this room today are showing the country what's possible when we show leadership together. So I want to take a moment to thank some of the people who have made this day possible. Cliff Holtz, who's the president of Humanitarian Services, and the team at the Red Cross. They remain strong partners in this effort, and I thank them for hosting us today, and you'll hear more from Cliff in just a minute. The Secretary of the Veterans Administration, Bob McDonald, is joining us today, and that's a really important development. Philanthropy and the private sector can't address these issues alone, so we need a strong Veterans Administration that is consistently working to improve its service delivery and accountability. And I'm committed to working closely with the VA and other government partners in developing impactful public philanthropic partnerships. General Ivan Denton has devoted himself to overseeing family assistance work for the National Guard, and we're grateful to him for lending his expertise to our discussion. And lastly, I want to thank Lee Woodruff and Senator Elizabeth Dole for joining us for a conversation on caregiving. So today we are releasing a report, you'll have this at your chairs, on the efforts of Impact Pledge members. And we're sharing this with the White House, with federal agencies, with veterans organizations, and a variety of other stakeholders. This report provides detailed data on the contributions the effort has received and allows us to reflect for a moment on some of the good progress that's been made over the last year. As the president and CEO of the Council on Foundations, I'm deeply committed from an organizational perspective to raising awareness about these critical issues in philanthropy, to facilitating collaboration within the philanthropic community, and about building meaningful partnerships that can make a difference. But my personal commitment to supporting veterans and military families runs much deeper than the advancements we're highlighting here today. Some of you may know I grew up in a military family. My father served in the Army for more than 2 decades. Our family was proud that he earned a Purple Heart for his valor in the Battle of the Bulge. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and within a year, 9 months to be precise, I ended up living in my mother's native country of Belgium, while my father fought again for our country in Korea, and our family was reunited in France shortly thereafter. After 3 years of learning to be French, my name is actually Veronique, my reward was a one-way ticket to Fort Riley, Kansas. Having seen my family, and especially my mother, respond to all of these transitions, I truly understand the toll that deployments take on families. And this past December, my husband Jeff and my daughter Caroline spent a frosty morning laying wreaths at the headstones of veterans buried at Arlington National, including that of my father and my mother. So many of you have dedicated your lives to families like mine. You're addressing the needs and gaps in services for returning veterans and their families. While we've made progress over the last year, there is so much work left to do. And with your continued support and engagement, we're showing our men and women in uniform that their community, that their nation stands with them, not just now, but for the long haul. So thank you to everyone here today, and thank you most of all who have served this great country of ours. It is now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who has dedicated himself to supporting some of the world's most vulnerable people. He is a strong advocate for the belief that all people, regardless of circumstance, deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. As president of Humanitarian Services for the Red Cross, Cliff Holtz leads global efforts predicated on a simple idea that undergirds everything we're doing today. Humankind is stronger when it acts together to support those in need. In some of our darkest moments, against seemingly impossible odds, we can create hope and opportunity for those who need it most. So please give a warm welcome to Cliff Holtz, representing the American Red Cross.
Okay, hopefully nobody can see my shoes, right? Let's get a little higher. Good morning. It's great to see so many partners and friends here with us today as we follow up on the launch of Philanthropy-Joining Forces Impact Pledge. This day signifies an important milestone in renewing the commitment by the philanthropic community to support our nation's service members, veterans, and their families for the long haul. The First Lady and Dr. Biden, through Joining Forces, called you to action last year, and their leadership continues to inspire today. So today we take measure of our commitment, and I hope rededicate ourselves to the important work ahead. As most of you know, the American Red Cross has a long history with the military. In fact, the Red Cross began with the courageous acts of our founder, Clara Barton, caring for wounded soldiers on the battlefield of the Civil War. We've been caring for wounded warriors ever since, and today we help Command meet its clinical and non-clinical needs on more than 100 military treatment facilities across the globe, with a network of more than 14,000 volunteers serving the military and veteran community. This work is very important to us, and we're honored to host today's gathering as we consider our own role as national convener and trusted agent in the veteran and military family community. All of us, from the leaders of the Department of Defense, Veterans Affairs, Labor, and others, to the nonprofit and philanthropic sectors, have made great progress in serving and engaging military families as a coordinated community. But we know there is much more to be done as the challenges for us are becoming more apparent. More and more men and women are returning home. More and more soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines are leaving active duty. And the legacy costs of the most deployed workforce in our nation's history is becoming more apparent in our families, and with military-connected children that are most often the last casualties of any prolonged conflict. But there is good news as well. The public is more engaged than ever and interested in doing their part. Each of you in the philanthropic community has participated significantly in propelling the work of so many of our nonprofit partners. And service organizations are better organized themselves, with a strengthened focus on delivering relevant and meaningful support where it is needed most. So while we rejoice in the return of our troops, and we look down that long, challenging road to reintegration and recovery that many will take decades, if not a lifetime, we know that it will help us. We know that it is us who will help step up to the plate. We know that it is our everyday citizens that can turn compassion into action, and small nonprofits, large VSOs, and federal agency partners are all part of the solution. But that private sector work does not happen without the generosity of donors. We are the world's third largest nonprofit on the planet, yet we do not exist but through the power of our volunteers and the generosity of our donors. We also cannot forget that our military is still actively engaged in combat theaters across the globe. They continue to serve and keep our country safe, so we must keep their voices and their concerns at the front of the conversation. Their well-being, and perhaps more importantly, the way we engage their talents in our communities, is of paramount importance to the strength of our nation. We must recognize and take action to leverage the incredible strengths and experiences that veterans bring to our communities. As many of us were reminded 2 weeks ago at the National Press Club, our veterans are civic assets, and our community leaders to be challenged to assume their role as torchbearers of the next greatest generation. Therefore, we must continue a balanced conversation regarding the challenges and strengths of military members and their families. And we must continue to cooperate in addressing these challenges as a community. So on behalf of the CEO and Board of Governors of the oldest congressionally chartered military service organization, I thank you for your commitment to this community and for pledging support to this important work. Thank you for what you have already done and for what we will do together going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Cliff. And great comments about the work with the military, but this is a tough time for a lot of people around the country with tornadoes and the like, and really need to recognize your great work. We had tornadoes in rural Illinois, devastated a town. We went out there, and our good friend Fran Edwardson, who runs the Red Cross out in Illinois, was there and already on the ground a day later and doing great work, so we thank you. And in this group, I don't want to, there's another group who was there too. Team Rubicon was on the ground at the tornado, and I want to recognize them in this group. And then I heard the next day they were in Nepal with the earthquake. So just great work and great service. Look, now it's a great honor and a privilege to introduce Secretary Bob McDonald. You all know his story, West Point and MBA at Utah, and was really the Supreme Commander at Procter & Gamble for a number of years. And so thrilled that he's come over to help at the VA at this time. Everybody has a Secretary Bob story, you know. I have my own. I met him in October in Kansas City, and I said, Mr. Secretary, it's a pleasure to meet you. And he said, call me Bob. And a minute later, I said, sir, and he said, you're a slow learner. So I've been practicing this introduction for weeks. Please welcome Bob.
Thank you, Don. It's a real thrill for me to be here. You know, as a young child, I grew up in Chicago. I was born in Gary, Indiana. I grew up in Chicago, and as a Boy Scout, I went to Cantini, and Colonel McCormick was one of my heroes. We went on a hike that day. We got a nice little medal for the hike. We crawled all over the museum and the tanks and the artillery. And I have to say that as a young child, that was part of my inspiration to go to West Point. So I have great fondness in my heart for Colonel McCormick, the McCormick Foundation, and everything that Colonel McCormick represents for all of us. Here's a little known fact. My department, the Department of Veterans Affairs, is what is today of joining forces. It's true. Back in January of 1946, my predecessor, General Omar Bradley, issued Policy Memorandum Number 2, which was all about joining forces. The memo established partnerships between Veterans Administration and medical schools across the country. These partnerships had a threefold purpose. First was to give veterans the highest quality medical care they could get anywhere. Second, to give veterans the opportunity for postgraduate study. And third was to raise the general standard of medical practice in the United States by using VA facilities to train medical professionals. In other words, the memo created what we call today a three-legged stool. It's a three-legged stool of VA care. It benefits not just veterans, but also all Americans. We talk about our health system as the canary in the coal mine. We see problems in the American health system before the general public does, and we try to fix them. The first leg of the stool is research. Through VA research, it leads to major breakthroughs that have resulted in 3 Nobel Prizes, 7 Lasker Awards. We did the first liver transplant. We did the first implantable pacemaker. It was VA doctors who invented the shingles vaccine. It was a VA nurse who came up with the idea of using a barcode to connect patients with medicines, with medical records. VA's got one of the first electronic medical records, and I could go on and on. So that research not only benefits veterans, but it benefits the American public. The second leg of the stool is training. Did you know that VA trains 70% of all the doctors in this country through our residency program? Did you also know that VA is the largest employer of nurses in our country and has training programs to train nurses? The third leg of the stool is, of course, our highly specialized clinical work. We have the very best doctors, but also the very best patients in the country. Today, VA partners with over 1,900 academic and research institutions nationwide. And without their contributions, healthcare today in America would not be what it is. That's why both veterans and the nation need the VA. In the past 9 months, to meet the rising demand for medical care, we've extended hours, increased authorizations for non-VA care, or what we call care in the community, and hired more doctors and more nurses. As a result, we're completing 97% of appointments within 30 days of the veteran's preferred date. We're completing 20% as same-day appointments, and 22% of those are completed by non-VA providers. We complete 500,000 mental health appointments each month, with an average wait time of about 3 days. And we've reduced our electronic wait list by more than 55%. With the President's requested budget, we'll be able to make the most of our partnerships and to make sure veterans get the care that they need and have already earned. But we need the House and the Senate to get on board and provide us the necessary funding. Remember, health care is just one of VA nine lines of business. Our other lines include life insurance, mortgage insurance, education, pensions, disability compensation, and memorial affairs. Now, we've got some reasons to be proud of some of those areas as well. We've cut the disability claims backlog by more than 70% in the past 2 years. We guarantee 2 million home loans with the lowest foreclosure rate and the highest satisfaction rate in the mortgage industry. For the past decade, the American Customer Satisfaction Index has ranked our cemetery system as the top customer service organization in the nation, public or private. And since 2004, the same index has also shown that veterans give VA health care higher ratings than patients at most private sector hospitals. 1/3 of VA employees are veterans. And with the right strategies and support, there's no reason why we can't scale that performance excellence across the entire VA. 1/3 of VA employees are veterans, but what was true in 1946 is still true today. We can't serve veterans the way they deserve to be served without public and private partnerships. I've been at the VA for 9 months now, and I've spent much of that time on the road visiting VA facilities. Everywhere I go, I find philanthropy in action, serving veterans. Last month, I was in Palo Alto, where I toured the Defenders Lodge, funded by my friends, Lee and Penny Anderson, and the PenFen Foundation, where veterans and their caregivers can stay for free while being treated at the Palo Alto VA Medical Center. In March, I was in Colorado for our annual winter sports clinic, where I was able to ski down Snowmass Hill with paralyzed veterans. This was sponsored by the Disabled American Veterans and a host of corporate donors, including Ford, Samsung, Prudential, Cisco, and many others. In January, I was in Chicago for a roundtable on an innovative program to get veterans working in the natural gas industry. It was sponsored by Chicago's city colleges, the Utility Workers Union, and the local utility, People's Gas. And last October, as Don suggested, I was in Kansas City for the World Series game dedicated to veterans. And before the game, I was shown what was renovated and brought back to life as a VA hospital annex, an old building that became one of the newest and most beautiful annexes through the generosity of the Kansas City Royals, the Bank of America, and Major League Baseball. The point is, there are plenty of opportunities for foundations and corporations to help out. They can help out with existing projects, with projects all your own, projects you can put a name on to say we did this for America's veterans and their families. Many of you here today have already stepped up to the plate to help veterans, and with your help, we've made great progress. We've made progress helping veterans find jobs, providing mental health services they need, and ending veterans' homelessness. Veterans' homelessness is down 33% since 2010, and you'll be hearing more about this later this morning. I am extremely grateful for all of your help, but I want you to know that we're working to make partnerships with VA both easier and more effective. We've made it a strategic priority. We've stood up an Office of Strategic Partnerships under Matt Collier. Matt, if you don't mind standing. Matt works with Doug Carmen and Maggie Kragniski, as well as many others. In Omar Bradley's day, a lot could be done with a handshake. Nowadays, things are a bit more complicated. But we have a lot to do, and we have a lot to be a lot more careful about, such things as information security, federal acquisition regulations, and many other restraints. But we're committed to making the most of our partnerships through a number of process improvements. We're working on clarifying current policies and streamlining procedures wherever possible. We're evaluating and benchmarking existing partnerships. And we're also conducting a gap analysis to identify areas of greatest need and opportunities for collaboration. We want to do more together in the future and not less. No question about it. Strategic partnerships are incredibly important to our future. And we welcome your advice and your assistance in making that happen. Thanks again for all you already do. Thanks also to the Council on Foundations and the Veterans Philanthropy Exchange for hosting this event. And of course, special thanks to First Lady Michelle Obama, Dr. Joe Biden, and the staff of the White House joining forces initiative. Your commitment to caring for those who have borne the battle and for their families and survivors is deeply touching and much appreciated by everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for those remarks. We all watched your 60 Minutes interview, and one thing that struck me was the very end. They said, "Why the hell you take this job?" And you said you felt like you prepared your whole life for it. So thank you. It's a great pleasure to introduce General Denton. He's a good friend of all of us. If those of you who were on board the Intrepid, he was there, being intrepid himself. He is the Director of Manpower and Personnel for the National Guard Bureau and really leads strategic direction and integration of all the National Guard personnel. So this is really important because, as we all know, the unique thing about the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts was the great role and deployments of the National Guard. General Denton.
I feel like I'm among friends, you know, that we tend to run in packs, and I kind of like this pack. Secretary McDonald, Mr. Cook, Mrs. Bruell, Ms. McGovern, Ms. Woodruff, and Senator Dole, distinguished participants who obviously make this happen with the Joining Forces Impact Pledge. On behalf of General Frank Grass, who could not be here today, I'm absolutely not only honored but thrilled to be here to really speak on behalf of about 455 Americans who serve out there day to day that are within our 54 states or territories. So when you hear me say states or territories, we do have 3 territories in the District of Columbia that we account for. So if you hear me say 54, that's not a mistake. It's so we're going to add 4 to the 50. But obviously, just as you said, Mr. Secretary, we're thrilled to be a part of this foundation. And the first thing I want to do is just say thanks, for being a part of this. You're going to kind of see in my themes where I really start doctrinally talking about government and non-government entities and what it's going to take for us to really carry the ball forward on behalf of our customers. quite frankly, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Okay, good. We've got, you know, I was always told by my professors that a picture's worth 1,000 words, so we're going to kind of have some pictorials that I think will kind of help with our dialogue here today. And unlike the secretary, I'm going to actually stick around here all day because this is one of my portfolios that I handle for General Grass, and that's quite frankly, I'm going to talk about joining community forces. I think it is important that we realize why the National Guard and quite frankly, all of the Department of Defense is engaged in this type of activity. And that is quite simple. We will not maintain an all-volunteer force if we don't care for those who currently serve and their families and those that have served. If we don't get that right, we're in trouble as a nation. And I will tell you that started with our first president back many years ago, in that the American citizenry is watching how we take care of them. And we got to get it right. So that's kind of my first macro point of selfishly, that's why I want to get it right, because we have got to maintain that all-volunteer force. A lot of you know that the National Guard is today. How many of you have served? Go ahead and raise your hand, or are serving. Okay, quite a few veterans in here yourself. I will tell you the National Guard of today is not the National Guard of the past. As a matter of fact, several of you know me in here. Went on active duty, was in a Ranger battalion and some pretty good units. Jumped into Panama after that bad guy, Manuel Noriega. My wife looked at me and said, "How many times are we going to have to move if you stay in the military?" "Oh, about 20 times. She said, "You know what? We're going to go back home." I went home and I joined the Guard, and a lot of my Ranger buddies would say, how do you like the Guard? You know, I really don't like the aspect of we really don't do much in terms of overseas deployments. That was in the 90s when I would say that. Okay, fast forward to 9/11, what happens? Our entire country gets put on a war footing, and the National Guard goes. I will tell you, I was able to do 2 overseas deployments, once as a battalion commander, once as a brigade commander. I'll share some of those stories with you. But I will tell you, probably one of the most meaningful jobs where I really got to see how we care for our folks, I was the recruiting commander for the state of Indiana. So when you have to walk into a parent's home and talk to that young man or woman, the parent doesn't always want to give you access to their sons and daughters. So that's why not only did I get a command units that go fight, I got the command units that actually go recruit. And I probably learned more in that job than I did in the others. And we've got to set up a safety net around those that have served so that we can continue to recruit, or we are going to be in trouble. I will tell you, I'm not going to go into great detail, but over 1 million mobilizations of Guard alone, not even counting USAR, Marine Corps Reserve. Our Air Guard is still incredibly busy. As far as our Army Guard, there's certainly been a slowdown. Go ahead and hit the next slide. What this slide really, as I kind of work with other DoD, both the services and the components, what I've realized, and we don't get credit for this, but the National Guard has been, is, and always will be the face of the Department of Defense. Unfortunately, because we tend to not want to brag about ourselves, we often don't take credit for that. And I will tell you, one thing I realized when I started looking at these maps, we are the face of DoD. The map to your left shows that mainly the Army Guard, Air Guard has about 90 wings with airports around, but we've got over 3,000 walk-in facilities that the Department of Defense has funded. Many of them are very, very old. They were there as we were a nation. But that's a pretty incredible map. Now, what's the map on the right? As I took 1st 293rd Infantry to war in 2003, we had none of those green stars. I almost said squares. What we've done, and quite frankly, Adam Rock's here from the Army, I will tell you the United States Army has funded this. We now have assistance centers that have been about 600 throughout the United States, and they have got trained what I call referral experts. I know I'm kind of dragging you down into the weeds, but there's a reason I'm kind of taking you down to the tactical level. We're going to maintain this, and you're going to help us maintain this, quite frankly, because these are national treasures in that, sir, they're not the VA, but we push people to the VA. They're not the Department of Labor, but we push people to the Department of Labor. And it's a pretty awesome infrastructure, and I didn't realize the national treasure we had until I just started going over maps, and I'm like, oh my God, I get to help oversee this for the Guard. What a, you know, it's probably the only thing, I mean, the other things I get to look after are diversity, equal opportunity, sexual assault, manpower. I will tell you, this is the only program that I really wake up in the morning and it's like, I can make a difference. Go ahead and hit the next slide. I will tell you, the other thing I want to just, we did 1 million touches in fiscal year 12, 2 million touches in fiscal year 13. We did 3 million touches in fiscal year 14 because of that map. That's a lot of referrals, and I will tell you, not all of them went to government. A lot of them were helped by you, by the non-government entities. So I love this slide in that if you're in the government, you always like to kind of have a slide. And obviously the Secretary and I are represented on the left there. Matter of fact, if you represent a government entity, please raise your hand. I want to kind of know who's here today. So not a lot of government entities, but several. So I'm assuming the left of you then would be that right silo. Now, the slide shows those together. Now, I will tell you, in reality, they're not together. They're silos, and what we're trying to do in the Guard is we're trying to bring those government and non-government entities closer together. And quite frankly, I think that's why we're all here. So again, I hate to drag you through the weeds in terms of here's what the Guard's all about, but I am calling out the Department of Defense, and I'm calling out all government agencies to what are we doing to bring in those non-government entities. I will tell you what's nice about the Guard. As you know, we exist because of our Title 32 authorities. The service secretaries exist because of the Title 10 authorities. Our Title 32 authorities allow us to work with the governors and the adjutant generals. We don't have as many, quite frankly, sir, all the red tape of the federal bureaucracy because we go down to that state and local level. And quite frankly, we have to answer to the governors and to the adjutant generals who are out there every day in the states slugging it out with you. So I always have fun with this slide because really all we're trying to do with our enterprise is have a more integrated operational approach. This is not joining forces. Joining forces is at the highest strategic level. But what I like to say is I have the most fun in the room because I can go all the way down to the tactical level, which is local. I can play at the state level, or I can play at the federal level. It's kind of cool to go to the White House at the very top of this thing, and then to be in my home state of Indiana. Sir, I didn't realize you're a Hoosier, and I always use the term Fort Wayne because that's where I commanded. But I can go down to that Family Assistance Center in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I can talk to our contractor, and I can say, how's it going? What can we do to help? And I will tell you, there's a lot we can do to help. We are not plugged in, and we are not integrated to the extent that we can be. Because I've got 576 integrators out there at the local level that don't know about you. They don't know what you do. Sir, I would say the VA might be an exception because, when you really look at what the VA does, sir, I was able to get an education because of the VA. My daughter went to Butler because of the VA. Many of our guardsmen have been to your sites. So I will tell you that what I really want you to focus on is where do you play on this field of battle, because at heart I'm a war fighter, and this is to me a field of battle. Where do you play and how do you plug in? And I will tell you, it's going to be won or lost at that local level, because that's where our customer at the bottom resides. We at the top oftentimes maybe think too highly of ourselves, and we can really, what we do can really make a difference. If we're not integrated, in the military we call it nesting. Everything, you got to understand what's going on 2 levels up and 2 levels down. So again, I'm not trying to take you through the weeds at the tactical level, but it really makes a difference. And again, I'm going to be a part of the breakout, so I'm looking forward to. I would tell you the other thing is that I've learned, although the VA is the big kid on the block, no government entity can do this on its own. No non-government entity can do it on its own. But please remember my second macro point of it. We're going to win or lose this based off the local level. Go ahead and hit the next slide. The third slide is a little bit of, okay, you've talked a little bit macro about what JCF is. Now, okay, how do we become involved? How do we become a part of this enterprise? Similar to joining forces, I think they have 3 lines of effort. We've got 4. As you kind of take a look at the first one, as a matter of fact, if you're involved in employment and education, raise your hand, please. Either not gov or non-gov, okay? That's your playing field. Matter of fact, Larry Dismore, are you here? Or excuse me, Mike Connor, are you here? Okay, Mike, stand up. Mike's going to be here the rest of the day. Mike is the champion for this line of effort for the Guard. I hold him responsible not only to work with our government partners, but our non-government partners. Mike has a direct line all the way down to those family assistance centers. Mike, thanks for being here today. I will tell you this, for a Guardsman, this is important. Matter of fact, we're blessed to have Adam Rock here today from the Army, who really represents Soldier for Life. I will tell you, our partnership is deep. And matter of fact, those family assistance centers that you saw is funded by General Odierno in the United States Army. That's how we palm for that money. So Adam, let's go ahead and give Adam a round of applause here for all that he does. Thanks, Adam. Our second playing field, I will tell you, and just as important, physical and behavioral health support. If you play in that arena, please raise your hand so I can kind of get a feel, okay? I will tell you the bulk of what I deal with are generally in these top 2 fields, top 2 lines of effort. Larry Dismore, if you want to stand up, I got Larry in the back, Lieutenant Colonel. Larry is the line of effort champion. Although we have colonels within the Army and the Air Guard that reach out, Larry kind of does the interface for our office, and he's getting to know a lot of the gov and the non-gov entities that are helping us. Larry, I appreciate you being here today. A lot of you know, and you can see the end states. I'm not going to go into the end states, but you can see the family support. A lot of you know Suzanne Hiscock, just a great Air Guard officer who does great work. She couldn't be here today. She really kind of handles the family side of this. A lot of you probably indirectly deal with the families. And then our 4th line of effort, what I call other areas of support. Folks, don't be surprised when I say other areas of support. This is financial literacy. This is legal support. Believe it or not, we do what's called funeral honors. You wouldn't believe the amount of veterans that our Guardsmen put to rest every year. So homelessness, it would be involved in that. I know that that's going to be an area that we talk about. So when you really look at this enterprise, the only reason we've kind of, when you say we're going to provide customer support, if we don't have some sense of a mechanism for how we do that, and that's this left side. Where is our doctrine on the government side of how we do this? So that's where the National Guard is kind of, for DOD, said, you know what, we're going to kind of doctrinally take this on in that we owe non-government kind of a description of how we're going to do this. So folks, that's why I'm here today. I'm here to make it easier for you to plug into this enterprise. Overall, in-state, I will tell you this, it's great to have in-states for each line of effort, and I've really thought long and hard about this as we kind of roll out this strategy. But I think the most important thing that I think are cancerous to the United States is suicides and homelessness. And I will tell you, when you look at this enterprise, it not only deals with those that serve, but when you look at our family assistance centers, about 20% of what walks in on a daily basis are those that have served. They're not necessarily all serving. So I will tell you that we are very, we're not satisfied, but we're certainly happy with our results in that we know, sir, we're making a difference on homelessness, and we know that we're making a difference on suicides. It's kind of like the sexual assault, which I get to oversee. Even one is too many. So we're really excited to kind of roll this out, and go ahead and hit the next slide. I think that's pretty much it. But I will tell you, VA obviously is a major player in two of those lines of effort. DOL is here. Terry, it's good to see you. I think, sir, you've got almost 3,000 walk-in sites, or no, I think it's Terry, thousands of walk-in sites between DOL, Department of Labor, and Department of Veteran Affairs. We are made to be partners. I look forward to working not only with our government partners, but our non-government partners as this thing, as we kind of move forward. I'm not going to go into examples, but we're all from a state, and I will tell you what the tags are doing out there. Illinois joining forces is unbelievable. Alaska has established a program. Basically, every adjutant general, I tried to get them to call all their programs Illinois joining community forces, India, but you know what? Tags sometimes outrank me. They'll tend to call their enterprise what they want, but I will tell you, every tag and every governor is doing something. Our job is to try to make the program a little bit better, and we're certainly dedicated to doing that. So just kind of in closing, just kind of to summarize the points, why are we doing this? To maintain the all-volunteer force. What's it going to take to make this work? Relationships. And I think, you asked me to use that word relationship. It really is about the relationships of how do our non-gov and gov work together? How do we form those relationships to be more effective? And then I would say third is let's focus on that local level. We can be great at the strategic level. We can be great at the national level. But if it's not making its way down to where the customer is, we're in trouble. So I just kind of close with that, and I will tell you, I can't thank you enough for being a part of this enterprise. It's our enterprise. It's not government. It's not government or non-government, but it's how do we work together to provide better customer support to those service members, veterans, and their families. May God bless you. Thank you.
Thanks, General. Those last two addresses are so perfect for this group because our job with what really is limited money in the philanthropy sector is to figure out where we have the most impact, where we can find the leverage points. It might be research, it might be policy, direct services, and the other thing we love to do is convene. As I like to say, it's interesting in Chicago, after 60 years of the foundation giving money to everybody, when we get on the phone and say we're going to have a meeting, everybody shows up. But it gives us an opportunity to talk and to get people in the same room. So thank you for your service. Thank you both very much for these wonderful comments today. Now we're really delighted, very, very delighted, to have two great ambassadors here for veterans and military families. And I'd like to ask Lee Woodruff and Senator Dole to please come up to the stage. We got to remember that the folks wear a uniform, but the families serve as well. So it's very critical that we think in terms of our philanthropy and the nonprofits of what we do for them. So they're going to lead us through and help us think a little bit about the extraordinary circumstances of families, the military and veteran families after these conflicts and deployments. So please welcome Lee Woodruff and Senator Elizabeth Dole.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Beauty before age,
Oh,
so you need to speak first. We're kind of honored to be here, aren't we?
Yes,
I've been
indeed.
a fan of yours for so long, and it must feel a little bit like coming home.
Lee, it does indeed. I spent 8 years as president of the American Red Cross, and I really do feel like I'm coming home. And isn't it a beautiful building?
We had a chance to speak on the phone yesterday, and we both decided that we could talk the bark off a tree. So we're going to stay to our remarks so we can focus this. Talking about relationships, where would any of our military families be without the relationship with caregivers? So you've been so integral to this conversation. How did you get involved in this? Can you tell us your story?
Well, you know, it really goes back about 5 years when my husband, Bob, was hospitalized at Walter Reed for about 11 months, Lee. And I was in and out of Walter Reed almost every day, and what I saw just really opened my eyes to an incredible challenge. The caregivers of the wounded warriors, mothers, fathers, siblings, but many young spouses were struggling with how they were going to manage, especially once they were home, to deal with all of the family legal matters and financial matters, caregiving, which they were not trained to do, and also just coordinating across medical systems with different structures, because so many of the wounded had multiple illnesses, wounds, and injuries. And so they were dealing with different healthcare systems and really struggling to determine how they were going to be able to manage this. And I remember a young wife sleeping by her husband's bed on a pallet, a father wrapped up in a blanket, sitting in an armchair, sort of watching over his paralyzed son. And seeing this day in and day out, it just pulled at my heartstrings. And I began to take some of the families downtown for dinner just to get them out of the hospital. And Bob and I had an opportunity once he was home from the hospital to have the caregivers, the families come to our home for dinner, and just to give them a chance to get away for a little while. And so gradually this developed into a need to set up a foundation, to establish a foundation. And I went through that process and realized very soon that what we needed was evidence-based research. And I was very, very fortunate. In fact, Terry Tanelian, I believe, is here today. Terry, would you stand for a moment? There she is, our lead researcher. We commissioned the RAND Corporation to do the first national comprehensive evidence-based research on this particular population, military and veteran caregivers. What are the needs? What's out there? Is it effective in serving them? And also, where are there gaps in services and policies and programs and recommendations as to how to fill those gaps? And so Terry was the lead senior researcher on that research. It was a 2-year research and really is the blueprint, I think, for going forward now to resolve many of the challenges and to fill the gaps in services and programs. And so that was, and I have to tell you, for those in philanthropy here today, it's not easy to raise money for research. But we were able to do that and to really have this strong floor, so to speak, from which we can operate now, because we know exactly what the needs and challenges are and how we can go about filling the gaps. And I think clearly the RAND research, Lee, affirmed the fact that this is a societal crisis, and we need a national response to this societal crisis. And certainly with 5.5 million caregivers across all war eras, many of them who are suffering physical problems themselves, emotional problems, and financial problems. We definitely need the philanthropic community to work with us in filling these gaps.
I think my experience is similar to yours in that not being a military family, but being from a family of journalists, finding ourselves in Bethesda Naval Hospital with Bob. We had many resources at our disposal, and still I struggled, you know, I can't say just as much as the military wife or spouse next to me in the room, but we struggled just as mightily with all of the issues of despair and grief and uncertainty. And a couple things stuck out to me. One was the inability for caregivers to feel that their needs are important enough to reach out and ask for help. I remember somebody gave me a massage for an hour to go get me, pry me out of the hospital and by the bedside. And I remember the entire time that I was on that table and I had my husband's ring around my neck, and she kept trying to get me to take my jewelry off, and I said, I can't do that. But the entire time that I was enjoying my massage, I was feeling guilty that my husband was in a coma and worried that that would be the moment that he would wake up and I wouldn't be there. And he would look around and wonder where he was and who was with him. That sense of guilt and that inability to put your needs equally to someone else is a real issue. And I have my same story about a spouse. It's one of the early, Anne Marie Doherty's here, but one of the early letters we received from a caregiver whose husband was pretty much in a coma, sort of a little bit awake, but in a wheelchair, and she was giving birth to her child. And she gave birth with him in the room. I'm not sure what he recalls of that. But she was writing to us for a grant for money, and it was a really specific amount of money. She had calculated exactly what it would cost for a babysitter for just 3 days a week, so that during those 3 days she could leave her child and work with her husband on rehab. And making choices like that after the sacrifice that our families have already made is absolutely not the way we need to be caring for our caregivers in this country.
Right. Lee, I am so grateful to you and Bob for all that you do. You are doing tremendous things to help our military families and our military members and veterans, and just God bless you for all you do. So let me say that right now.
I think, no, well, you're
Yes.
I am not worthy, as Garth would say on Saturday Night Live. We are all in this room together, and we could not do this without you all. We all have our eyes on the field and who needs help. And the connection here, the collaboration, is the really amazing thing. We are not going to get anywhere, sir, without all of us joining forces. And the name is apt because we can't sit in our silos anymore. We are losing the attention as these wars draw down to very specific elite forces. We will forget. We forget every day. I live in the suburbs of New York. Nobody in my town is going about their day and considering our injured heroes. Nobody on the soccer sidelines. Their problems are things like, returning a shirt at Marshall's. And that should not be what our nation thinks about every day. So thank you for the work that you're doing to keep the caregiver in the spotlight.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Well, they're such hidden heroes. And I think because we're so separated from the military today, with less than 1% defending our freedom and our security, people across America just have no idea what's going on in military families. And here are these heroes who are literally deeply hidden. People just don't know what they're going through at home, trying to provide for coordinating medications and arranging for rehabilitation and preventing triggers that could set off an emotional response that could last for a long period of time, raising children. And we find that in many cases, the spouses or the caregiver has to be in the workforce because they're now the only breadwinner for the family. And so with the medical expenses and raising children and so on, they have to be in the workplace. And Terry Tenelian will tell you that Rand found that about 3.5 days a month is missed from work because of the caregiving responsibilities. And so there are a lot of workplace employment needs that have to be adjusted to have flexibility in the workplace. And we're very grateful working with the Chamber of Commerce and a lot of others on providing that sort of flexibility for the caregivers of our wounded warriors.
I think another issue that will come to the fore over time more and more that we need to give credence to is really the issue of caregiver post-traumatic stress and their own trauma, not just fatigue and empathy fatigue and relationship fatigue, but just the trauma that someone goes through, especially when you get that phone call and any little trigger can send you back as a caregiver. And then you add being a mother on top of that and all of the worries that a mother or a parent has anyway for their child. And you're creating this very mixed bag of mental health issues that no one talks about or wants to talk about.
That's true. That's very true. And I would just point out that talking about collaboration now, we could not begin to do what we're doing now without the help of so many of you who are in this room today. We're just doing tremendous work. And we found that setting up a national coalition, because this is a societal crisis that deserves a national response, it meant bringing together the government, the nonprofit organizations, the private sector, the labor community, as well as the faith community. Because as Rand has told us, when there's real crisis in a family, when the caregiver feels this distress and physical problems, they turn to the clergy, but the clergy don't understand. They're not educated to know the problems and to watch for signs of distress. And so this national coalition has given us an opportunity to really move forward to break down some of those silos that we were hearing about earlier. And I found in my 45 years in public service that if you want to make major breakthroughs, you really must bring down the silos, break down the barriers, leverage resources, utilize innovation. Collaboration is absolutely key, coalition building, and shining a light on success. And so that's the set of principles that we're trying to use today in working with these issues. And I'm happy to share several examples because when we announced the National Coalition last year, I said a year from now, we're going to be gathering the coalition for accountability purposes. In other words, what is this coalition, all these organizations, what have they really done to have direct impact on these caregivers now and to lay out the path ahead, or more appropriately, the year ahead? And so that's going to happen on May 20th. We're going to bring the coalition together and really look at what's happened and where we're headed. And I just can't say how grateful I am to so many organizations for joining in and working to bring down those barriers and to have a holistic approach to these problems that Rand has pointed out. To give you an example, the Military Officers Association of America, and Admiral Norb Ryan, I think it's in the room. Norb? There you are, yes. Admiral Ryan and the American Bar Association, as well as Public Counsel, which is the largest pro bono law firm in America. These three have joined together with my foundation to work out what we call Lawyers for Heroes. And so when there's a legal problem and a family is just financially stressed to the point that they just can't pay for a lawyer, this group will provide for free legal aid. And that's the kind of collaboration that I think can make such a difference. Also, certainly, Catherine Grimes is here with Bristol Myers Squibb, and Linda Davis is here from TAPS, and Bonnie, hi Bonnie. And there's a wonderful, with the Woodruff Foundation, with my foundation and Bristol Myers and Wounded Warrior Project, we've joined together, all of us as funders, to provide for the peer mentoring network or the caregiver network, which provides for a safe and secure opportunity for caregivers to connectivity. You know, Rand found that so many of the caregivers are isolated and just completely alone. Amazing what percent are so just by themselves with no support group at all. And so, Bonnie, Carol, you all are doing this great work of really collaborating and overseeing the coordination of scores and scores of organizations who are helping to provide the opportunity for the caregivers to connect with one another, to share experiences, and to really have an opportunity to learn from each other and to provide solace to one another and comfort. So that's the kind of collaboration that I think is so important.
You talked about the spiritual leaders and needing to sort of educate them about some of the issues. What more needs to be done? What's another sector that could help alleviate some of the issues for caregivers?
Well, you know, let me say before I answer more directly here that I think the impact councils that we've had a chance to set up, leaders from our national coalition have agreed to serve, just like Catherine Grimes. Catherine is serving as the chair of the Mental and Physical Health Impact Council. And these 7 impact councils are really digging deep into the issues that Rand has pointed out as the most severe problems for caregivers, 7 areas. And so that would include the workplace issues, the mental and physical health. It would include respite care, many other areas.
Probably education
Right,
as well.
education and training, absolutely. And the councils are coming up with immediate issues that can have impact right now, resolution of certain problems that can impact the caregivers' lives now and also looking down the road, what's going to be needed on the path ahead, as I mentioned. So the impact councils will be reporting on May 20th. We're looking forward to that time. And I think that this really will help us to lay out where we go from here.
That's fantastic. That's a lot of progress. I remember when Bob was discharged from his rehabilitation hospital, so not here in Washington, but we were back in New York, and literally they handed me a giant sort of gallon Ziploc of all of his meds and just handed it to me. And I thought, okay, no medication scheduled, no education on how to do this. It was absolutely terrifying. Now, I think things have gotten a little better, and there are online websites for things, but I remember thinking, I'm not a nurse.
Yeah, right.
How am I going to do this?
Exactly.
And again, I know where to go to get resources. So part of the issue, too, I think that you were pointing out in terms of caregiver connectedness is I can't do the math, but 40-something when Bob was injured. And I never expected to be a caregiver at that age. In my 70s, probably.
Right.
But the relative youth of so many of these spouses for these caregivers, they don't know other people in their position necessarily where they live.
Right.
So that isolation is even more acute for those caregivers.
No question about it. And you know, another aspect that we should focus on is what Washington needs to do, because certainly in terms of the Congress, there's legislation that can make a real difference. And I was very pleased when John McCain, Senator McCain, and Senator Jack Reed agreed to co-chair a Hidden Heroes Congressional Caucus along with Leader Nancy Pelosi and also Jeff Miller, who's chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee in the House. So those four are serving and are all very really energetic and excited about trying to make a difference here. And of course, John is head of the Armed Services Committee. And Senator Patty Murray has reintroduced legislation. We've most recently been working with Patty Murray and also Susan Collins, Republican, who is co-sponsoring with Patty, and then Jim Langevin in the House of Representatives. And this legislation would really expand services for caregivers in the Defense Department, in the Veterans Administration, and also would apply to pre-9/11 caregivers on a phased-in basis, as well as respite care and a number of other issues. So it's important to look at that aspect of it as well as we move forward. But, you know, as I talk about the work of the impact councils and the recommendations that we're dealing with and the legislation, I just can't tell you how important the philanthropic community is. If we're going to get any of these things done, we're going to need support from the philanthropic community. You're absolutely essential. So thank you so much for what you have done already, and look forward to working with you in the future.
And thanks for keeping the caregiver in the equation.
Yes.
Boy, you didn't need me to do this at all. I mean, you hit all those points.
Oh,
You're proud. You're proud.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for your stories, personal stories, but your personal leadership. I remember Lee gave a fantastic talk to us on board the Intrepid, and I remember being struck by an interesting point that her husband had terrific support from the network, but so many of our folks don't, and that there's that's what we got to think about. So anyway, thank you so much. We're going to take a break in a second. Stay put because we have something very special. And it's about caregivers. I want Callie Barr to please come on up here. She's part of the support group at Fort Belvoir, and specifically for caregivers working with family members recovering from TBI and PTS. She's going to share a poem she wrote for her husband, in tribute to her husband, all the men and women who are caregivers and serve. So please, while they're keeping the daily fires burning and going to work and so on. So please, welcome, Callie.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to give voice for military caregivers. At the sound of colors, we stood. Colors sounded. The ropes were untied, and the pulleys worked the woven fabric flag down. and it was handed to us, not folded, but wrinkled, maybe here or there, worn so high on the air, for so long here and there. They were sun-bleached or soaked, torn, some tattered. They had holes burned through stripes and blood dried between their stars. But they were beautiful, and they were handed to us, spouses, teachers, doctors, therapists, lawyers, experts, non-experts. So we took them, each in our own way, steady hands, trembling hearts, or brave hearts and shaking hands. We laid them out and knelt beside them to look over those holes and tears and faded dye, and perhaps we cried. Or we didn't. Maybe we sat stoically or angrily or bitterly or lovingly. What I do know is that we stood, and we ripped from our own hems pieces of ourselves to fit over charred remains, and we pulled out strands of our hair for string. And we used our bare hands to thread, and we tried to sew solace. Or maybe we just tried to piece that piece with our piece in hopes of making a whole more whole. In those small and precious places, we know that no man is ever just the sum of himself. And so we clean the stars and thread impossible needles and leave pinpricks of our own blood no one will see but us. We persevere to preserve for weeks and years and decades this flag. No longer a flag, this pieced together masterpiece, but a carefully constructed patterned banner of collective courage, sacrifice, and ultimately, ever ultimately, of love.
The Bristol-Myers Squibb Foundation is proud to be co-leading this effort with the McCormick Foundation, Blue Shield of California Foundation, the Lincoln Community Foundation, and Blue Star Families and the Council on Foundations, and our very good friends and advisors, the Bob Woodruff Foundation, this year as well. So we're really proud to be a part of this effort. At last year's convening, we announced pledges totaling $170 million in cash and in-kind contributions from foundations and corporations. And we know that many more donors and philanthropies are doing much more. But we initiated the pledge to try to capture and quantify what the philanthropy sector is doing. And you heard earlier this morning, this year we've now announced commitments of more than $278 million over the next 5 years to stay committed to partnering and finding solutions for our returning veterans, their family members, and caregivers. We wanted to provide the corporate and philanthropic sector with a way to come together in a collective spirit to support veterans and military families. And that is what the Impact Pledge and the Veterans Philanthropy Exchange that was launched last year by the Council on Foundations is all about. And yesterday we had our first ever live funders-only convening under the Philanthropy Exchange. So we're really excited about leveraging and mobilizing that platform and bringing funders together to share lessons and do more together. We are pleased to partner with the White House's Joining Forces initiative, and thus the name Philanthropy-Joining Forces Impact Pledge. Last year, we were honored to have First Lady Michelle Obama and Dr. Jill Biden with us to announce the pledge organizations. And while the First Lady's schedule would not allow her to be here with us live today, I'm happy to announce that we do have the First Lady with us today virtually. The video, please.
Hello, everyone, and thank you all for coming together again this year on behalf of the Philanthropy-Joining Forces Impact Pledge. Last year, I was so proud to help you kick off this effort to bring together charities and benefactors to support organizations that serve our veterans and military families. It was a significant step, one designed to show these organizations and, more importantly, these families, that this country will continue to serve them, not just while they're deployed overseas or wearing our country's uniform, but here at home for the rest of their lives. And in just a year, you've come so far, bringing in even more donors and organizations. And altogether, you're pledging a total of more than $275 million on behalf of these families. That is an extraordinary achievement, and it's a reflection of your efforts and of the tremendous love and respect out there for military families across the country. So I want to thank you all for continuing to build support from across the philanthropic community, because the truth is that this work is ongoing. It won't be finished in just a few years or even a few decades. So I want to encourage all of you to keep reaching out to more donors, keep working together and challenging each other to be even more effective, and keep spreading the word about the courage and sacrifice of our veterans and military families. Because as we've seen time and again through joining forces, when folks hear those stories, they want to serve those men and women as well as they've served us. That's exactly what you all are doing, and I want to honor you for all of your hard work, and I look forward to working with you in the years ahead. Thanks again, and God bless.
So it's wonderful to have the ongoing support of the White House. And as Vicki said this morning, this year's convening and this effort today was not as much a focus on getting new pledgers and new pledged dollars to the effort, but about starting the collaborations and starting to build the partnerships so we could all do more together. But we do have several significant new funders to the effort, and I want to take this moment to announce our 2015 pledges and present them with a newly minted challenge coin with the inscription, "Leveraging the Sea of Goodwill," that was designed by the Veterans Philanthropy Exchange. For our philanthropy colleagues who may not know or be familiar with what a challenge coin is, a challenge coin is a military tradition. It's a small coin or medallion bearing an organization's insignia, logo, emblem, and carried by the organization's members. Challenge coins are normally presented by unit commanders in recognition of special achievement by a member of that unit. So it is in that tradition of achievement and esprit de corps that we want to present these coins to our 2015 pledge organizations. So please, as I call your name, join us up at the front. Peter Long will be handing you a certificate. Don Cook will be awarding you your challenge coin. And then please do just all stay up here. We're going to take one group photo at the end of my calling out the new pledgers. So with that, Walmart and the Walmart Foundation, we are thanking you for your commitment to programs, providing job training, transition assistance, and education. Senior Manager Kathy Cox from the Walmart Foundation is here today. Kathy, please join us on stage. The Conrad Hilton Foundation, committed to programs to end veterans' homelessness. Ann Miskey from Funders Together to End Homelessness will accept the recognition on behalf of the Hilton Foundation. The Jewish Women's Foundation of New Jersey, an affiliate of the New Jersey Community Foundation, for its focus on women's veterans. Joining us today are Jane Kessler, Laura Alpert, Amy Schechter, and Leslie Frost. Please join us. The Lockheed Martin Corporation, committed to organizations supporting military members, veterans, and their families. Emily Simone, Director of Community Relations, please join us on the stage. The New York State Health Foundation, for its commitment to helping replicate best health care and mental health practices and strengthening behavioral health providers in New York State. Liz Ward, the foundation's program assistant, will receive the recognition. And Jacqueline Martinez. Jacqueline, come up. Jacqueline, come up. The WebMD Health Foundation, committed to providing assistance to a number of initiatives in California with a focus on mental health. Peter Long, President and CEO of the Blue Shield of California Foundation, will accept the award on behalf of the WebMD. I wondered how we were going to do that. My partners in crime. Please join me in recognizing the foundations for their commitment Don Cook will need you for the photo and for helping to leverage the National Sea of Goodwill. Excellent. I will now turn it back over to our MC, Don Cook.
Thank you all. It's great to. What the hell is this thing doing? Okay. So the next session, we wanted to focus on one of the key topics, and as we know, post-Vietnam War, homelessness is a major issue for veterans, and so we're really happy to have a little bit of a focus this morning as well as later on this. And we're seeing a steady decline, fortunately, in the number of veterans homelessness, but this is largely because of unprecedented cooperation with the federal government and a coordinated approach in communities, and mayors and nonprofits and so on are really working very, very hard on this. Government investment's been significant, but there are still significant gaps, and there are opportunities where flexible funding is required. And so we're going to talk about that. We have a wonderful panel today. It's going to think about and talk to us about how agencies can coordinate across the country on this and highlight where there's still needs that they can help us. And I want to ask Ann Miskey, whom you just met, but Director of the Funders Together to End Homelessness, to come on up and she'll introduce the panel that we're about to have. So please welcome Ann. She's been a philanthropist, a tireless worker, collaborator, and a team builder. So we're really pleased for her to do this. Thank you.
I'll invite my panel to come on up and have a seat. I know that everyone in this room would agree that it is unacceptable that the many men and women who have served so selflessly to keep us safe in our homes sometimes end up without homes of their own and live on the streets or in shelters. This is a terrible reality that exists in our country. And even one veteran being homeless is too many. But we're actually here today to talk about something very positive, because we are making progress. Due to unprecedented cooperation in the work that's being done here in Washington and communities all across the country, we are seeing our veterans being given permanent, safe, and secure homes. Opening Doors, the federal plan to end all forms of homelessness, has given a path that has created systems that quickly, effectively, and permanently end homelessness for our veterans. Under the guidance of this path and with the leadership of the VA and HUD and the Interagency Council to End Homelessness, and with partnership with nonprofits, with philanthropy, with community leaders, and with our veterans, cities like New Orleans, Phoenix, and Salt Lake City have declared victory. They have ended veterans' homelessness in their cities. And there are many other cities and towns across the country who are on the path to end veterans' homelessness. But they cannot declare victory yet. There is still more to do. Now, our government has committed to ending homelessness, and they are actually putting the resources behind it. But government cannot do it alone. There are things that government cannot do. There are things that government cannot fund. And there are things that government cannot change. It is up to all of us, and especially it is up to philanthropy, to step forward, to focus our attention, our resources, and our ability to make positive and permanent change. If we work together, we can declare victory in this country and end veterans' homelessness. I am joined today by an incredible group of people who are experts, but more than that, these folks here have been instrumental in ending veterans' homelessness in this country. And they're going to talk to you today about how that's happening and about what else is needed for us to declare victory. So the bios for the panelists are in your program. I'm not going to go through them. I'm just going to do a very, very brief, let you know who the people are. To my immediate left is Anthony Love. Anthony is a Senior Advisor and Director of Community Engagement for the Department of Veterans Affairs. Next to him is Anna Oliva. She is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Special Needs at HUD. Then we have Matthew Doherty, who is the Executive Director of the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. And last but certainly not least, Roseanne Haggerty is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Community Solutions. So I am going to start by asking Anthony to speak to us from the perspective of the VA. If you can talk a little bit about, give us a picture of veterans' homelessness. What are some of the numbers? What are the things our veterans are experiencing?
Okay, can you guys hear me? All right, well, good morning. Okay, I counted more than 6 people. Good morning. So, from the perspective of the VA, first I want to thank all of you for the work that you're doing. This is definitely a collaborative effort. VA cannot do this alone. That's why we've partnered up not only with HUD and USICH and other community partners, but with your contemporaries around the country. As you've heard from our secretary and you've heard from Ann, we've made great progress when it comes to ending veteran homelessness. We've seen a 33% decrease since 2010, but there's still a lot of work to do. We still have, at any point in time, roughly about 50,000 men and women who've served this nation who are still without a permanent place to call home. And although we are still concerned about those who are coming home, the bulk of the folks that still are needing our help who are out there on the street are still those veterans who are post-Vietnam. They still make up a large percentage of those that we need to serve. And so that's who we are dealing with. And for VA to take some leadership in that, we've had to really kind of shift a paradigm in terms of how we serve those men and women and how we execute strategies. So we've adopted, strategies like Housing First and rapid rehousing to ensure that those veterans are getting into housing first, not only, but first, so that they eliminate the chaos that is homelessness and are able to receive those clinical supports that are necessary to keep them housed. We are looking at the great work that's going on around the country. Ann has mentioned that they've effectively ended homelessness in New Orleans, and Salt Lake and Phoenix have ended chronic homelessness among veterans. And so we're taking those lessons and so forth and incorporating them within policy in an effort to make to the home stretch in the next 234 days, that is the end of this year. And finally, I would say that what we are wanting to do or what we're needing to do is just to continue to work with you and to have that sense of urgency and to work better, faster, smarter, and together in an effort to not only just reach the goal, but to save the lives of those men and women who are out there on the street.
Thank you, Anthony. Anne, can you talk a little bit more about what has been effective in ending veterans' homelessness?
Sure. Thank you, Anne, for having me, and thank you to the group for having me. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about this today. Anthony, how many days do we have left?
234.
234. I actually knew the answer to that. I just wanted to make sure that you all remembered how many days we have left, because this group of people up here, as well as all of our teams and other team members that are not present this morning, know that number every day, because we have a short period of time to get to a big goal. And so in terms of the things that I think are helping us make the progress that we're making, and the first thing I'd like to point out is, so my voice keeps getting a little bit weird, but the 33% decline is between 2010 and 2014, we haven't published the numbers yet for 2015. We expect that decline to steepen in 2015. The point-in-time count is our metric that we use, and that usually happens, that count happens at the end of January. We're just collecting that data now. So it's important to know that that's like a year lag, and we hope that we've made a more significant decline since January of 2014. Really, I think that there's a couple of big things that have helped us. The first is political will. And political will happens not just from the president, although like it's really, really helpful to have the president and the first lady behind us on this, and that is amazing. But our leadership within our agencies, USICH, VA, and HUD, we've been working on this since 2008, 2009. The plan, Opening Doors, came out in 2010. So the political will that we have behind us in our organizations, including all of our leadership asking us to report on this. Every quarter, we are responsible for reporting back to our leadership on this, and we have to actually report up to the White House as well. But political will doesn't just happen at the federal level. It happens at the local level as well. And Roseanne is up here. She's going to talk, I'm sure, about what happens on the ground when her and her team are there. But it is incredibly important to have mayors and county executives and city council members on board, because without them, it is really hard to make progress at the local level. And then the second thing I would say is data and vision help us figure out what the scope of the issue is at the local level as well as at the national level. Anthony talked a little bit about the national numbers, but we can't end homelessness among veterans at the national level until we do it at the local level. So our local folks need to understand their data, not just their point-in-time count data. They need to understand inflow. They need to understand what their resources are at the local level and how to shift those resources to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the people who are presenting to us for assistance instead of trying to shove them into a system that might not be working for them. So it's a constant loop of data and having a vision about what you want to do. When Mayor Landrieu decided that he was going to take up this charge, he got political will, but he also got data, and he decided that they could do it in New Orleans a year earlier than everybody else in the country. And it was with focus and with a lot of cooperation at the local level. It was nonprofits, it was the government, it was us, it was advocates, philanthropy, but it was also looking at the numbers every day and understanding who was homeless in their community, where they were, and who was going to reach out to them. And as Ann mentioned, and I think Anthony mentioned as well, government can't do it alone. So it's incredibly important to have partnerships, both here at the federal level and to have those partnerships flow down to the local level. Because without that team of people in place, we can't make the kind of progress that we want to make going forward. And that's why you don't just have feds up here. You have community solutions up here. And there could be 20 more people up here that are really helping us work through all of these important issues at the local level.
Thank you. And Matthew, I'd like you to carry that a little bit further, because the work that you do here in DC is really about kind of herding cats, bringing all the various government agencies together and acting in some ways as a broker for the different agencies. But also your role is really about connecting what goes on here with what's happening at the community level. So could you expand a little bit more on that?
Sure, thanks, Ann, and happy to be here and really glad to see so many people who are in the room today focused on their role that they can play to support communities to make progress and to help us end veterans homelessness. I do think the interagency coordination that we've been trying to achieve at the federal level, and it's not always easy, and sometimes we have to work through some difficult issues, is the very same kinds of changes that need to happen at the local level. And the communities that are making the most progress, like New Orleans, like Salt Lake, like Houston, like Phoenix, have found ways to work across their sectors but get behind a shared vision. And I think maybe we should define the vision of ending homelessness, it's 234 days to get to the goal of really drastically reducing the number of veterans that are experiencing homelessness and ensuring that every veteran who is still homeless at that time isn't sheltered but on a quick path to permanent housing. But the goal doesn't end on day 235. The goal on 235 needs to be to sustain that system and make sure that in the future, any veteran who is experiencing a housing crisis, has fallen into homelessness, that every community can respond quickly and can help that veteran and their family back into housing as quickly as possible and make sure that that experience is brief and rare and one time for veterans moving forward. And communities that are making the most progress really understand both elements of that goal, driving their numbers down, helping veterans who are currently experiencing homelessness, but also building that system to make sure that they can sustain that progress and never see us recreate the level of veteran homelessness that we've seen in the country. Fundamentally, those communities are also beginning to operate less as a set of programs and agencies that act independently, but really trying to move together and function as a system, and a system in which every agency has critical roles to play, making sure there's really no wrong door for entry, for asking for help, making sure that there's a standard way that we're asking questions and assessing veterans and their families and identifying what's the right and appropriate and safe and secure and stable housing opportunity that as a community we can provide to that veteran and their family. And fundamentally, as we've already touched upon, that housing, they've shifted their processes to really be housing first focused. And housing first means we're removing as many barriers as possible, getting people to the permanent housing opportunity with the right level of services as quickly as possible, ensuring that it is housing first, and it's safe and secure and can be stable for them, and becomes a platform for them to be able to pursue their other goals, address challenges they may be facing, to increase the financial stability of their household. But without that housing as that platform, we can't see that kind of success and progress. And I think fundamentally the communities who are making the most progress have recognized that it cannot be the job of the VA alone to end homelessness in their community, that we need every part of the community. We need the business community, we need the elected officials and the political will, we need private philanthropy, we need nonprofit organizations, we need public housing agencies, we need the local representatives of the federal agencies, all working together as a team in pursuit of that shared vision and recognizing both elements of the goal of ending veteran homelessness. And there really are critical roles that we see philanthropy playing at the local level, really helping to develop the buy-in among providers, that they can operate as a system. That kind of a change is not easy. It requires different ways of approaching your staffing and your training and really different skills at collaboration that have not always been the strongest skill set of the homelessness service sector, but we're seeing great progress in that area. It requires capacity building and training to convert to this housing first approach and really abandon some of our preconceived notions of what is going to work and really focus on those best practices. But organizations can't make those changes without investing in their staff and the skills of the staff to be able to operate within that model and really recognize the best practices and implement those practices with fidelity. I think we've already touched upon the role that philanthropy can play as conveners and bringing together those sectors to have the conversations, to identify the roles that they can play, to develop that shared vision and to move that community forward. And then also, I think we really need to see the connections between the homeless services sector and what we think of as the mainstream housing and services systems, the mainstream public housing agencies, the workforce system, the other behavioral health care systems, all of the elements of care that are available in our community. Those bridges don't happen automatically, and we need to invest in the ability of the nonprofit homeless services sector to identify, to partner with, and to have the right conversations, the strategic conversations with those mainstream systems in order to be able to fully operate as a system and not rely on the targeted homeless assistance programs as the only source of support, because we can't build an efficient, lasting system with just those resources at the table. And then we've identified some very specific gaps that we've heard from communities that I think I'm going to have a chance to touch upon later. So there's also some concrete ways that philanthropy can invest in the systems that communities are building.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. And Roseanne, you and your organization, you folks are on the ground. You are actually working in communities, making this success happen. Can you talk about that experience at the ground level and talk a little bit about the experience of the veterans that you work with?
Well, thank you so much for having us here today, and it's great to be with these terrific partners. And this really is such an extraordinary story of progress, and that we are in the home stretch says so much about everyone's commitment to this issue and the vision that we can actually end homelessness among veterans this year. Community Solutions leads Zero 2016, which is a movement of 75 communities plus an additional 10 communities who are part of something called the 25 Cities efforts. And in all of these cases, these communities are going all out with unprecedented collaboration on the ground to end veteran homelessness this year. What our organization brings is really a new set of tools to enable collaboration. All of us have touched on this. The tragedy and the opportunity is that in communities, we see that many of the resources that we need to solve this problem are there, but there aren't the habits of collaboration, connecting the dots, optimizing resources. So we've brought performance management and quality improvement training and coaching, a whole sort of design thinking ethos around how do you solve your way out of a problem when it's really kind of some of our own habits and rules that are getting in the way. And maybe I could ask for the slide here. What we're seeing, and this really is in part a data revolution. Every community involved needs to know by name who their homeless veterans are, needs to know how many people need to be housed on a monthly basis by the deadline to get the job done. And you'll see that, for instance, Honolulu is going to get there. And so our job, working all together in really just a problem-solving way. You know, this is all about learning and just getting better every single week. The goal is to get all 85 communities to zero by the end of the year. We certainly, that represents the majority of homeless veterans in the country, and these vanguard communities are sharing the lessons learned in real time with other communities about how you get the job done. Now, I'll say just a bit about challenges, and this is, you know, with this kind of national view. We need landlords. We talk about where we need collaboration that hasn't really habitually been there. Because of the commitment of the VA and HUD and USICH, we do have many of the rent subsidies and other tools that are closing the gap for veterans getting into housing. But we don't always have the apartments. So in community after community, it's really reaching out to that sector of the community and saying, you are the critical part of the solution that we're seeing is one of the big boulders in the road. And the other challenge on the ground really is no one typically pays for this collaboration. And so I'll just switch to where we've seen critical roles that philanthropy has played. First, it's in funding the bringing together of disparate partners to just get the job done in a new way. And I'm thinking of, for instance, in San Diego, Funders Together has brought together and provided the resources for all of the agencies on the ground to have a really well-oiled machine of an effort to get homeless veterans housed. The William S. Abel Foundation is doing the same thing here in Washington, D.C. The Hilton Foundation is doing the same thing in L.A. This catalytic funding to support collaboration against this urgent and completely achievable goal. And then I'll also say that but for philanthropic investments, we wouldn't have seen the kind of innovation that's really opened the door to this goal and the possibility of getting there. Our own work was funded for 2 years only by philanthropy who were willing to sort of fail forward with us as we learned what it would take to bring these collaboration tools into communities to help them perform in ways they hadn't before. And I just really need to shout out Chase and Bank of America and Home Depot Foundation and William S. Abel and Hilton for their early faith in the idea that we could learn new ways to solve this problem. And then lastly, I think we really are going to be looking to philanthropy, as Matthew pointed out, to kind of hold the line once we get this job done and to not let communities slip back into less productive ways of working and to really sort of insist on standards of performance and resource optimization and a quality result that our veterans need to have us ensure. And philanthropy has an important role to play in not letting us fall back from this high performance standard.
Thank you. So you can see by what the panelists have said is there has been incredible cooperation, there's new ways of working, there's been risk-taking. All of the pieces are coming together, and it is making a difference. I don't think, I've been in philanthropy for many, many years, and I've rarely seen an area where we can say, success is happening. We're actually ending this. So it is really amazing. But as much as all of this is working, and as much as our government continues to fund efforts and we have the commitment from the VA and from HUD, there are gaps that are keeping us from getting to our goals in a lot of cities. Roseanne mentioned some areas where there is real need, but I want to talk very specifically now about what are some of those gaps. Where are there areas that philanthropy can put some money in, can put some resources in? And maybe I'll ask you to talk a little bit first about what is different about philanthropy from government. I mean, you have massive government dollars and little bit of philanthropy. So where do you see the effect happening there?
So, You know, I've been in government for about 8 years now, and I came from the private sector, from the nonprofit sector largely, and worked a lot with philanthropy and foundations locally. And it's so different, so different. It was shockingly different, as a matter of fact, for probably the first 2 years. So the first thing that I would say is that you all can say things that we can't. And you don't know how important that is, because there's plenty of times, I'll just speak for myself, I won't speak for my colleagues up here, where I really want to say something that might not be the easiest thing for somebody to hear from a government official. And, obviously might not be appropriate to come from a government official. But other partners can say these kinds of things that are important for local folks to hear. And it also, when you have a local philanthropic organization that knows the city or knows the county and really understands the players in a different way, it's not just that I can't say it, I don't know it. And that brings a lot of power to the words that a philanthropic organization can say at the local level. I also think that systems change, which is something I think all of us have mentioned in our comments so far, really has to happen sort of as a grassroots effort. We can try and impose it from the government. We can say, we want you to do systems change, and this is what systems change means to us. But that's not going to happen. People will pay lip service to it to try and get grant funding and that sort of thing. That's probably something that a government official shouldn't say, but I'm saying it anyway. They will say the right words, but for it to actually happen at the local level, you need that catalyst, those folks who are holding the line at the local level, which I think is incredibly important. And then there's also, this flexibility and this convening power that everybody has talked about, and bringing folks to the table, whether it's all the pieces of the puzzle. And that's so important in communities who are trying to do systems change and don't really know which pieces of the puzzle are still missing. They don't know where the holes are. And I think that philanthropy has a unique vantage point to be able to say, we work in all of these areas, and I think you're missing this partner or this partner that can help you fill this particular hole. So all of those things are important, and I don't think that we would be seeing the kinds of change in communities that we're seeing without that level of commitment.
Thank you. So Matthew, let's get down to the nitty-gritty.
Sure.
What are some of the gaps? What are some things that government can't fund but that are needed to end veterans homelessness?
Okay, great. So we, through our national initiatives team, we work with communities across the country. We work with many of the communities that Rosanna was talking about with Zero 2016, then 25 cities. And we have heard some consistent themes of obstacles that are preventing them from feeling confident that they can get to the goal. They're working as hard as they can, but there's some critical gaps. Part of why communities are able to make this progress is because we've seen the federal investments into rental subsidy programs, long-term rental subsidies through the HUD-VASH program, which provides a Section 8-like subsidy with VA services, and shorter-term subsidies available through the Supportive Services for Veteran Families program, which provides a shorter-term subsidy, lighter case management services, but still focusing on getting veterans and their families to permanent housing. But there are obstacles that prevent local communities from using those federal resources as efficiently as they can. One of the things I'm hearing from communities every day is the challenge of finding landlords. That as rental markets have gotten more expensive and tighter, it's harder and harder for agencies working with the veterans to find landlords who are willing to prioritize renting their units to veterans. That seems absurd that landlords don't prioritize veterans, but there's so much competition in many of these communities for those rental units that it's very easy to fill, and it's a harder challenge for landlords to think about partnering with a nonprofit organization or the VA and really setting aside their units and targeting them. But many communities are trying to generate local landlord recruitment and engagement campaigns, trying to do that just with their own resources, just as their partnerships among nonprofit providers. But that's really a role that philanthropy could play by investing in that kind of a public awareness campaign, and recruitment campaign could really help take that message to scale in many of these communities and really identify landlords who will act upon their as it is our national obligation to end homelessness among veterans. So that's a key gap. We also find that it's sometimes hard when we can find that unit and link that veteran and their family to a unit, that the federal resources typically can't pay for household furnishings, for cleaning supplies, for a bed, for sheet, for sofas, for the things that make that home. And it's really important that as people exit their homelessness, they're entering a place that feels like home to them, that feels lasting and permanent, a place they can close the door, let their breath out and really know that they're home and it's their place that they're in charge of. But we need investments into what we think of as welcome home kits to help make sure that as veterans are finding those landlords who are renting that apartment, that we can then line up the resources to make sure that the day that they open that door, they're seeing a place that feels like home to them. So really think that's a key gap, that it is challenging communities to find ways to create that home-like atmosphere for veterans. And then the process of getting out of homelessness is not an easy one for anybody. And for people who are facing significant challenges, maybe struggling with disabilities, may have some mental health issues, maybe struggling with their use of substances, it can be a complex process to navigate their way to assistance. So we've really identified that in the communities that are making the most success have invested in the outreach and engagement activities that are needed to find veterans who aren't finding their own way into the system of care, to identify those veterans, to engage them, develop that rapport, that trust that allows them to ask for the assistance that they need and to start that process of coming into shelter or coming into permanent housing. And then the process of getting from saying, yes, we want that assistance, to getting into the permanent housing. The communities that have been able to speed that process up the most have created housing navigator roles that walk that veteran and their family through the process of applying for housing, for identifying units, for helping them make sure they're getting to appointments, really navigating through what can still be a complicated process even as communities are moving towards these systems. But communities are struggling to find the resources to invest in those kinds of roles. Many communities don't have enough outreach and engagement activities going on. And so there are veterans out there on our streets who don't know about the programs that are available to them, and the system is not finding them easily. So we need to invest in those kinds of roles in communities. And then that navigation function is actually a new idea for many communities to really play a more active role in making sure that they're not just referring people to assistance, but they're helping navigate and create the smoothest pathway to that assistance that they can. And communities are struggling to find the resources to expand that role and to take that kind of a strategy to scale.
Right, thank you. Now, I know that there are also a lot of other things. Some foundations, some communities say, look, we can't really invest in these big things, or that's not something my foundation does. But there are a lot of other needs that veterans have. And Anthony, maybe you could speak to what are some of the other things, maybe some of the smaller ticket items, if you will, where it's really going to make a difference in having a veteran move from homelessness into housing?
Sure. I mean, I think it runs the gamut. I think that, Matthew touched on some of it as, veterans get into the housing and so forth, the household supplies and things that are necessary. I think, though, smaller things that could be helpful is around the employment space. As these veterans are, getting back on their feet and so forth, there could be things that help with transportation issues, a bus card, or a taxi voucher, or work boots, or things of that nature that for the most part federal dollars are not necessarily paying for. One thing that is not a small ticket item, but that we at the VA really need that help on, that's a real gap, are those veterans, because of their discharge status, that are not eligible to receive services from VA. And so we definitely need community help and targeting those veterans, because when we talk about ending veteran homelessness, we're talking all veterans, not just those who are VA eligible. So those are some of the things that are particularly necessary, particularly in those employment space, and then also around the legal space, working with, I know there's ABA there and they're doing some great work, but there are some minor infractions that are on some of these veterans' records, which creates another barrier for that veteran to be able to exit homelessness. And so working with veteran courts and others to ensure that that veteran has another chance to improve their station in life.
Great, thank you. Roseanne, any final words from you about the role that philanthropy can play?
Well, I think I'd just like to echo the notion of civic leadership beyond philanthropic support. This is within our grasp, and the role you all play as civic leaders. I grew up in Connecticut, and one of the proudest things is that the whole state of Connecticut is in Zero 2016. I want to be the person from the state that was the first to end veteran homelessness. And I want you to want that for all of your communities. Who wants to live in a community that missed the boat on this urgent national call? And so to rally people around this issue and this possibility, this completely solvable, measurable problem, is something we can all do together. But it really is about a local win in every community of the country. And that's the message that you can bring back to your communities and use your convening power and your influence to say, we got to get this done.
Thank you. Just one more question, and this is for all of you. How do we check ourselves as a nation to ensure that this doesn't happen again? That veterans don't fall into homelessness in the future and get left on the streets? Anthony, I'll start with you.
Oh, of course. That's a big question. I think that, this just has to remain important. It has to be a priority for all of us that no man, woman, and child, no veteran finds himself homeless. I mean, we have to take up the mantra that, as it relates to homelessness, one day is too long and one veteran is too many. And I guess that's my time. Oh, no. There we go. And so to just, really, make it important that every American citizen, every veteran deserves a safe, stable place to call home. And so to continue to invest in those things that work, as Matthew stated, on day 235, our work is not done. And so to continue to make the gains that we've made and to sustain the progress we've made, we have to continue to invest in those systems and those solutions that have been working, and to continue to keep this as a priority.
Great, thank you.
So I'll tell you what I think my responsibility is as a federal official. I started out my discussion today, my portion of the discussion today, talking about political will, but this has to transcend politics. And I'm a career federal employee, so for me, I think it is incredibly important that I take the time as a career employee to institutionalize all of the things that we know are working, so that it, again, transcends the administration, it crosses administrations, and this should be happening at the local level as well. Folks who are on the ground need to be institutionalizing the behavior and the systems change the same way that we're doing at the federal level, to make sure that when the mayor changes or the county executive changes, that those tools are still in place for everybody, and that the systems change that we're fighting so hard for now is going to stay in place over the long term. Because again, even though we have 234 days between now and when we're supposed to meet this goal, it's really about maintaining our progress over time and ensuring that we're constantly monitoring what's happening, so that this doesn't happen again.
Thank you. Matthew.
I think I'll piggyback on both of those, that it's very much about embracing that vision of having a system in place that can respond to housing needs moving forward. But I think what's going to help us assure that we sustain that progress for veterans is that we build that kind of a system that can end homelessness for every American in our communities. And the First Lady refers to ending veteran homelessness as the proof point. The proof that we can end homelessness, that we don't have to accept homelessness in our community for veterans, means that we don't have to accept homelessness in our communities for anybody. And that if we can use the progress that we've made on veterans, we can use the strategies that have demonstrated how we can mobilize communities in support of this goal. We can use federal resources in support of evidence-based and best practices. If we can start to really translate those lessons from the progress we're making on veteran homelessness to ensure that we're making progress on all homelessness, that's going to build the systems within our community that's taking care of everyone, including veterans. I think that's the third part of the vision that we really need to embrace, is bringing down the number of veterans experiencing homelessness, building the system that can assure that veterans won't experience the same kind of crisis in the future, and using that success to build the system that we need for every American.
Thank you. And Roseanne, you get the last word.
Well, in addition to echoing all of my colleagues' remarks, I'll just say that anonymity is the enemy. If we know every veteran in our community who's experiencing homelessness or facing homelessness, we're not going to let it happen. And I think that's one of the things we've learned. If it becomes a number or a statistic, it's just a bad thing. If it's a person whose name we know, we're going to do something about it.
Great, thank you. Do we still have time for some questions? Yes? Are there any any questions from the audience for our panelists? I know you're all a really shy bunch of people. Yes.
Is there resources available to us, any templates we can use to honor landlords, or some kind of fun pin or something to give them for, being part of the team? Is that already developed, and is that available to us?
Sure. Well, I appreciate you asking for a template, because we actually do have some fact sheets around some of the specific gaps that we're experiencing in communities, including one that focuses on a message to landlords about the role that they can play. And then we've started to gather in some examples from communities who have tried to piece together those kinds of materials to market the opportunity to landlords, to help them understand the opportunity, help them understand some of the benefits that they might experience. I think a lot of those materials could really use a little investment of some marketing skill and expertise and polish to really speak to that audience, which is another great role that philanthropy could play. But there are examples out there, and then there are many communities who have started to create these local campaigns. So if you're interested in this kind of an opportunity within your community, we might be able to connect you to some of the right people.
Great, thank you. Yes.
This is I'm Bob Reed with American Legion Auxiliary. Hi, nice to see you all. New world. Old friends up there. I just want to broaden, more a statement, but you can react to it, just broaden our meaning of philanthropy beyond your typical foundation type of approach, that philanthropy is also goodwill, both monetary and volunteers from service organizations such as the American Legion Auxiliary, but thousands of us around the country, don't have to be veteran related, the Kiwanis, the Lions, all of us have roles to play also, and a really easy way for us to play is on those welcome home options. It's like, yeah, we mobilized our women members when they were going to the grocery store for themselves, buy an extra Costco set of paper towels, and some of our units have collected all of that, so they prepared buddy baskets, so when there's a veteran moving into a permanent home, they're greeted with the household supplies. So it doesn't necessarily need to be just people writing grants to foundations for that. I encourage all of us who are listening to this to remind ourselves philanthropy is bigger than foundations, and that there might be roles foundations can play. So, I'm really not going to write a grant for the paper towel collector, but I'm going to make sure that in that community convening that you've all said is a great role for funders and the traditional meaning of funder, make sure that volunteer organizations are at the table, because we have a lot to bring that is the low-hanging fruit that doesn't need big $100,000 checks.
Thank you. That's a hugely important. Go ahead. No, go ahead, Ann. No, I was just saying a hugely important point. Thank you. Ann.
In New Orleans, in particular, they actually mobilized their former military, as volunteers to go out and do outreach to veterans who were on the street. And it was really positive for the veterans who were living on the street, but it was also really positive for the community members, and it created more buy-in. So I think that your point is really well taken. There are roles for lots of different types of organizations, community and civic organizations, in addition to your traditional funding organization.
Thank you. This lady here, I think, was next, and then the gentleman. We've got somebody over there. Okay, Tim, after these two.
Hi, I'm Barbara Van Dalen, president and founder of Give an Hour. And I love Bob's point, hi Bob, about things that we can do. And obviously, one of the things that we can do, we have 7,000 mental health professionals all over the country who are giving free services to our troops, their families, their communities. So what can we do as a community to connect those dots? Because we talk about the incredible importance of mental health. We all know it's there. Jessica, we circle and talk to each other, but there seems to still be, in terms of connecting some important, very simple dots. How can we move that forward today? That would be a great thing, because Bob's point is, the small ways that people can participate, and we have kind of a big way that we could connect those dots, but it doesn't exist yet, the connector.
One thing I can suggest, Barbara, is that these communities who are participating in Zero 2016, they each have a lead person so that we could compare geographies and where you have volunteers, they would know where to plug in and who the contact person is. So we can speak afterwards.
Great, thank you. This may be being done, so it may be an ignorant question, but people love incentives. So are there, I know, short of passing laws where landlords could get financial incentives or tax write-offs, are there incentives community by community that could incent landlords to house people, whether it's as direct as Target coupons or whatever that may be? Have people come together and tried to brainstorm those kinds of things that would allow that landlord a gold star financially?
That's a terrific idea. Off the top of my head, I don't know of any communities who have instituted anything like that, those who have really done a very good job on mobilizing their landlords. It's really been this appeal to civic pride and the importance of the issue, but I think you raise a very good point, and especially with 244 days, I think we should try everything.
Yeah.
And an opportunity.
Hi, thank you all very much. Did you want to say something further?
Just want, in some communities, what we've seen funders is they've pooled their resources together to create a risk mitigation pool. So if landlords are willing to rent, they might feel like they're taking on a higher level of risk, that household might damage the unit more, might be more likely to cause problems. The risk mitigation pools almost never get tapped, but having them in place give that assurance to landlords who may be a little bit hesitant and can be a small pool of funds that can really help open a lot of doors.
Well, just a reminder for those of you who I'm sure already know, there's the Mayor's Challenge is, it's not exactly the kind of incentive that you're talking about, but I think it certainly is an incentive for mayors to participate in this challenge, and they get recognition from the White House. There's a list. I mean, the First Lady was just down in New Orleans working with the mayor and his team on announcing the progress and trying to understand what they did right and getting that word out to other mayors around the country. So there is some incentives. There are some incentives for folks sort of at that higher political level.
Yeah, and I think that a way that all of you can help is also having some recognition for those landlords who are willing to step out there. They're 4-star landlords or something like that. Everyone likes recognition, and I think that would go a long way as well as bringing more landlords to the table.
Thank you.
My name is Terry Keene. I'm director of the National Center for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder in Boston. And I'm curious what the risk factors are for homelessness for veterans, and if there are lessons that we're learning from veterans and the solutions that you're finding that work for veterans that may actually be generalizable or more broadly applicable to the problem in the country that's far broader than just veterans.
So from our vantage point, I mean, when you look at the general population and veterans, there's really, the risk factors are pretty much the same in terms of, the affordability of housing, in terms of certain type of health issues that create certain barriers. Okay, I'm just going to talk very loudly. That create those barriers, whether they be mental health, whether they be physical health, et cetera. I think what we've seen with veterans from the post-Vietnam, a lot of that, not only was there an affordability factor, but there were also those other issues that they had to deal with from combat, the unknown, in terms of what we call post-traumatic stress now, but back then was called shell shock or things like that. And so I think that, the lessons we've learned from those veterans is that even in the general population, that mental health assistance as well as helping those folks with affordability are going to be the main factors if we're going to have any success largely.
I would add that there's a few things. So when we're looking at the veterans population, there's not everybody needs exactly the same kind of intervention. So the important thing at the local level is to ensure that that the veterans are being assessed in a way that helps to point to the right kind of intervention and the right dosage of intervention for them. So chronically homeless veterans, for example, for folks who have been out on the street for a long time and have fairly significant mental health issues or other types of disability, should probably just need to be prioritized for permanent supportive housing. That is housing that is permanent in nature, and that has wraparound supportive services. But that's all done within a housing first context. And that's one of the things that we've seen work for veterans. It's, I think, one of the reasons that we've made the progress that we've made over the last few years is because we have very deliberately gone after a housing first approach, especially with the HUD-VASH program. And then for the veterans that don't need that type of intervention, VA has a program called SSVF, and that's a lower level of services. It's a less intensive amount of time that folks can be in the program. So I think that all those things are important, but it has to be tailored to the individual.
Yep, I agree.
This lady over here, I think is.
So nobody can hear her.
Just get you to hold 2 seconds. I think the mic is on its way, so we can.
Hi, I'm Amy Schechner. I'm with Jewish Women's Foundation of New Jersey, and also I'm a trustee with the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, who is also here today. Can you please address the special needs of women vets in vis-a-vis homelessness, and what can be done in particular with them?
Sure. I think, in fact, one of the not so bright spots around the decreasing number of veterans who are homeless is that there's an increasing number of women veterans as a representation of those veterans who are homeless. And what we find more so often than not with women veterans as opposed to the general veteran population is that they come along with a child. And so veteran family homelessness is becoming an issue that we need to spotlight on. So those women veterans definitely are more likely to need that care that also takes care of the child. Permanent housing is definitely a first and foremost for all veterans, but specifically for those women veterans. And then also, too, there are a lot of other traumas that come along with women veterans who have served in the military, and there's going to be a higher likelihood of military sexual trauma and things of that nature that have to be dealt with those women veterans, and making sure that we have providers who are competent in those particular areas and also sensitive around that issue. Women veterans in particular, and not to generalize, but a number of them feel more comfortable in an environment that's much more welcoming to women veterans, so it may be a women-specific environment. Sometimes, a big VA can be a little intimidating for some, although we're making great progress in ensuring that women veterans feel welcome and comfortable there, and that we have those healthcare services available for those women veterans.
Thank you. I just want to do a quick plug that we do have a workshop this afternoon that's going to go in depth into more of this, and also hopefully we'll have those people that are involved in this in the audience share what they're doing in their communities. I'd like to thank my panelists today for sharing their wisdom, their experience, their knowledge. I think we're seeing that we are headed towards victory, but it's going to take all of us, everyone in this room and everyone across the country, coming together and communities to figuring out that we need to work in new ways, that we need to really serve those who have served us. So again, thank you. It's been a real pleasure and honor to be here today, and I look forward to talking to you again.